First Samuel, and we're at chapter 10. And before I go into the text, as I said, I'll wait another moment. But meantime, just a refresher, where we left off is he now has been told he's encountered Shmuel, Samuel the prophet, who has revealed to him that God has designated him, Saul, Shaul, to be the king of Israel. And he's going to be anointed. And we've learned together some of the laws of Jewish kings of Israel. And we're now going to go forward. Thanks again. And I said, we have another 1 or 2 people at least coming in. Let's get started. So, Vayikach Shmuel et Pach HaShemen, Vayitzok al Rosho, Vayishakehu Vayomar, Vayomer, Haloki Meshachacha Hashem, al Nachlato Nagid. So Samuel anoints him. Excuse me. The word Mashiach, as we said last week, means anointed. Has started. Everybody's there? Yeah. That was Denise just asking a question. So we're now, as I said, chapter 10, and he's anointed with special oil. And it's important to know it's olive oil. And by the way, just Denise was not sure, she didn't get the screen. Just raise your hand if you hear me okay. Okay, that's fine. So it requires a special kind of oil. You can't just pull olive oil off a shelf or something like that. It had to be prepared in accordance with certain rules, regulations, and the Kohen had to be involved. That, by the way, is the reason that for Hanukkah time, the miracle of Hanukkah talks about how the Greeks had invaded Israel and occupied the land, took control over the land, seized the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, defiled and desecrated it. They took out all the holy things. They brought in their gilulim, their desecrations, and then eventually the Maccabees overcame them, drove them out, liberated and cleared out the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, and set about to light the menorah. And that's the famous problem that arose. Well, we only have enough oil for one day, and it's going to take a week to get more oil. So why couldn't they have enough oil right away? Olive oil is very easily obtainable in Israel. Olive trees are part of the national heritage, and it's all over. But it has to be prepared a certain way. You don't just take, let's say, some olive oil out of Italy and pour it on a guy's head and say, you're the king of Israel. And so what you have happen here is that Shmuel, as the prophet designated by God to anoint the king, was ready and prepared. Okay, he tells, just refreshing where we left off last time, he tells Saul, Shaul, okay, you go back home, and here's what's going to happen on your way back home. This is new from where we left off. Here's what's going to happen. First of all, you're going to encounter 2 guys, Shnei Anashim, in Kevurat Rachel, and it's going to be like around Bethlehem, where Rachel is buried, the tomb of Rachel, Kever Rachel. Bigvul Binyamin, and that's in the boundaries, in the region, the territory of Benjamin. Okay. Now, V'amru elecha nimtzeu ha'atonot asher halachta levakesh. And these 2 guys are going to come and say to you, the asses, the donkeys of your father that you have been sent out to find, they've been found. Now, I mean, if you yourself were walking somewhere in Irvine or New York or Los Angeles or Ohio, wherever you are, and someone were suddenly to stop you and say to you, I'd like you to know you were looking for your eyeglasses or your sunglasses, and they happen to be on the kitchen counter. So you'd say to yourself, how in the world could the person know Number one, I lost my eyeglasses. And number two, I don't even know this person. So in the same context, what you have happening here, let's just bring everybody in, okay. And so what you have happening here is Shmuel, the prophet, is saying that's going to happen when you go on your way back. Two guys from out of the blue are going to stop you as you pass the area of Rachel's tomb, and they're going to tell you the donkeys were found. And then they're going to further tell you that your father no longer is worried about the donkeys. Now he's worried, what about my kid? Whatever happened to you? And so Shmuel says, and then what's going to happen is, then you're going to go to the next place, the terebinth, the tree, the oak of Tavor. And alone is an oak. Oren is a pine tree. So you're the oak of Tavor. Olim el ha'elokim betel. You're going to find three other guys, and they're on the way to Beit-El. And we have spent time in other classes of this course talking about how Beit-El was one of the really holy cities in Judaism from the time that Jacob had his dream with the angels going up and down the ladder. And we went through how he built a mizbeach, an altar, a monument to God. And we went through a number of other places where Bethel is a central place in all of historic biblical Judaism. And so it's a place people would go in order to worship God. Well, you're going to be passing three guys who are on the way to Bethel. And one of them is going to be carrying three little sheep, kids, kid like a baby sheep, a goat. And another one's going to be carrying 3 loaves of bread. And a third one's going to be carrying a flask of wine. You got that? So you got one is carrying 3 kids, one's whether he's literally carrying it or he's bearing it, however and his second one has the loaves of bread, 3 of them, and the third one's got the flask of wine. And you're going to see 3 guys like that. And they're going to say, hi, how you doing? Shaul lecha shalom, l'shalom. And v'natnu lecha shtei lechem, v'lakachtem yadam. And from among their 3 kids, flask of wine and 3 loaves of bread, they're going to offer you 2 loaves of bread. So when you get it, take it, accept it from them. And here's what's going to happen next. Next, you're going to go to Givat Elokim Asher Sham Nitzivei Plishtim. You're going to go to a sort of a valley. The translation here is hill, but really a Giv'ah would be more of a valley. See what's this letter D? I'm curious. So often I complain about their translations. All right, whatever. You're going to go to this valley of God, and there you're going to see some Philistine religious leaders. We're no longer having Philistine problems. No more wars with the Philistines. They leave us alone. You'll remember we learned about 2-3 classes ago about the big war that Shmuel led, and that was it. After that battle, the Philistines never bothered us again. You'll remember we had that stuff with the hemorrhoids and the 5 golden mice and the battles, and that came no more trouble. We learned there was never another problem with the Philistines for the rest of Shmuel's life. So it was safe to pass their area. You'll see some Philistine religious leaders. And as you go there, you're going to pass an area of Nevi'im. Let me explain it. A lot of people don't know this, but there actually were prophets. We talk about the famous prophet Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Yeshaya, Isaiah, Shmuel, Samuel. We talk about famous prophets, Nathan, Natan, Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. But actually, there were a lot of quote unquote minor prophets. And a prophet was someone who, I don't know how to explain it exactly. Imagine someone who really devotes his life. I hate to use this example because it's another religion and it conjures up and conveys a different image, but based on our contemporary world and what we've learned in school, in history, think of the kind of people who devote their lives in a monastery, whether you've seen it in movies or however. The idea of someone who devotes his entire life to the service of God. Nowadays, the closest we have to that are people who spend all their days and nights learning in kollel. And they sit and they learn Torah all day and all night. They actually receive a government stipend because it's considered an important part, let's say in Israel, of having a Jewish country, just like a country gives stipends to people to study for graduate degrees, right? If you're going for a PhD, it's not unusual to receive a fellowship so that for a period of time you don't have to work and you could just focus on your studies and the government pays you money as a fellowship that they're collecting from your taxes. In the same way, Israel will pay a fellowship or stipend to a certain number of people to sit and learn all day. Now, in those ancient biblical times, you had people of an extraordinarily holy, quasi-hermit-like existence. That's why I used the example of monasteries, who would truly sit and learn all day. And they developed a holiness and a sanctity that placed them on the level of what was known as prophecy. So he's being told that you next, after those guys who give you the 2 loaves of bread, you'll encounter some people who are prophets, and they're going to be in prophetic ecstasy with lyres and timbrels, flutes and harps, and they'll be speaking in ecstasy. They'll be prophesying, metnabim. And v'tzocha alech ruach Hashem v'hitnabita imam. And you, when you encounter them, will have an extraordinary religious, spiritual, there's no word for it. You're going to have a spiritual experience where God grips you, and you also will be, quote unquote, prophesying. You will change into another person. You will undergo a sudden spiritual ecstasy transformation. And you'll know it when you feel it. V'haya, ki tavona ha'oto ta'elelach. And when all these things happen, okay, you encounter the 2 guys who tell you that the donkeys were found and your father's worried about you. And then you've encountered the 3 guys of whom they give you 2 loaves of bread. And then when all this happens, first of all, if you needed further proof that I, Shmuel, Samuel, am a real prophet, that'll seal the deal. By now, you've already figured it out. But when all this happens, at this point, you can be certain that God is with you. At this point, you may be certain you are God's anointed. Not only have I anointed you, but if you have any remaining doubt, I mean, here's this man, he's a holy man, and it was recommended to me to go to him for lunch, and people told me he's a holy man in town, and this man just anointed me. But if you have any doubts in your mind whether I had authority to do it, whether I know what I'm doing, and whether this is the real thing, because I do sense Shmuel is basically saying that you're not 100% convinced like this is the real deal. But once you've encountered all of this, you'll know it's the real deal. You are the king of Israel, believe it or not. And again, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's like, for me to make this, to appreciate it, all I could say is, I mean, let's say you've graduated law school, you just finished law school, and you just sent out a bunch of resumes, you're trying to get a job, and somebody tells you, you know, tomorrow morning, you're going to take this freeway or highway, you're going to get off at this exit, you're not intending to, but there's going to be construction, and you're going to get off at exit 14, and at the 3rd light, you're going to find a cop in the road that stops you and says, get out of the car. And you're going to get out of the car, and this cop's going to look at your driver's license and your registration, and he's going to tell you, you've just been named a partner at the law firm of Jones Day Revis and Pogue. Like, that doesn't happen to people who graduate law school. You go to law school, or whatever else happens, that doesn't. And then later that day, it happens to be that you had sent out resumes and you have an appointment at 3 p.m. at Jones Day Revis and Pogue. A week ago, you got a thing in the mail and you come there, and as you walk in the door, like a person at the front door says, Miss Jones or Mr. Smith, Mr. Fisher, welcome to the new partnership. Your office at room 403 is ready for you, and we hope you'll find the keys to your brand new car waiting for you. We hope you'll enjoy it. And all you could say is, I hope it's not a German car. But other than that, you're set. And you think back to the guy who told you, tomorrow you're going to get off the freeway and it's going to be construction and the cop. The only thing that goes through your mind is, I got to find that guy again and ask him, can you give me any tips on tomorrow's third race at Aqueduct? Because I'd like to put all my money down on that horse. Anyway, so we continue. So from this, now that you know this is the real deal, you will go to Gilgal. Let's remember where Gilgal is. Let's just take a very quick look at the map. So Gilgal, again, to refresh your memory, it's a little bit fuzzy, the lettering, but that's how this map is. It's not your screen, it's the map. So here's Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. Here's Bethlehem. So here's Kever Rachel, Rachel's tomb in this area. And he's going to go to Gilgal, which is just about on the Jordan River north of the Dead Sea, on the Jordan River. And this is a meeting place. You'll recall we've encountered this before. We've encountered before Givon and Mitzpah, Ramah, we talked about. There's Givah and Nov, Gilgal. Okay. So anyway, that's where this is taking place. So you're going to go to Gilgal and you're going to wait for me 7 days. You're going to go there for the purpose of offering sacrifices to God. Shivat Yamim Tochal Ad Boi Elecha, wait 7 days till I arrive. And file this in the back of your mind. It is extremely important later on, not today, but later on, we'll reference back to the fact that Shmuel said, wait 7 days for me. And then I'll get there in 7 days, and I will tell you exactly what you do next. And as Shaul now prepared to leave and begin this journey where he's going to meet all these different people, yada, 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 on the way home, he's got another heart. The only thing I can compare it to, and it's not a good comparison, there is something called the imposter syndrome. Maybe you've heard of it. In imposter syndrome, let me share it with you. When I was ordained a rabbi and I was hired to serve my first congregation, and I got up there and people started calling me Rabbi Fischer. It didn't sound, I felt like an imposter. Not that I even knew there was this syndrome. And no one before ever had called me rabbi. The day before, I still was a student in rabbinical school, and they gave me a certificate, a cloth, a parchment that ordained me a rabbi in Israel, among the Jews. But when people started actually calling me rabbi and actually started asking me rabbinical questions, it's one thing when my sister asks me whether something is kosher. Before I was ordained, I already was learning in rabbinical school. I had a lot of knowledge, and my sisters and other people would ask me questions that came up because they knew I would know. But now suddenly people I don't know from Adam in Jersey City, New Jersey, my first pulpit, are suddenly coming to me. They hired me, asking me rabbinical questions. The kind of questions I've been asked before, but never by people that don't know me. It felt awkward. And I cannot tell you the minute, the day it happened, but it wasn't the first day or the first 3 days or the first week. But suddenly there was one day, one thing, and suddenly at that moment, it just no longer felt like, who am I? It felt like I am a rabbi. And I experienced exactly the same thing when I finished law school. And I started working at Jones Day as a junior associate. And there was one occasion early on, it's inevitable, this is part of the job, where a partner was very busy and a phone call came in from a less important client with a less important question. And it was assumed correctly that if I graduated law school and I had the credentials I did, I should be able to answer the question, which I was able to do. And the partner said, take line 2 and talk to this guy. He's from BOC Gases. Okay. I pick up the phone and he's talking to me like I'm an attorney. And after he asks me the first question, based on my answer, it's like he asked me 6 questions. I thought it's going to be one quick question and I knew the answer. And the questions started getting harder and harder. It was like a TV game show. It was, it's like Jeopardy. Started off $20, $40. Now we're getting down to the daily double. I mean, this is really hard stuff. And when you get the daily double, do you notice nobody can ever say in Jeopardy, you know what, I'll pass. No one ever said, it's a subject. They have no idea this subject, but it's the only subject left on the board. So they're willing to ask questions. So the subject is 19, is the year 12, the 12th century music. And they've asked $20 question. And it turns out to be double jeopardy. Nobody ever says, I don't want to have to bet my money. I can't risk it on this. They always bet. Anyway, it felt like double jeopardy. And I felt very uncomfortable because he kept talking to me like I'm a lawyer, as though I'm a lawyer. And although I had a law degree, I'm a member of the state bar at the time, I just felt like a phony, what they call the imposter syndrome. And it took a couple of days or weeks, I don't know what it was. And then there was that one day, that one phone call when suddenly I felt like I'm entitled to make believe I'm a lawyer. I'm as much a lawyer as the next one in this office. Maybe not as good, but I'm bona fide. And that's what happened to Shaul. That's really what's going on. He's a guy from the tribe of Benjamin looking for his father's donkeys. And he finds out before he knows what hit him, he's the king of Israel. And he just doesn't feel it. And Shmuel says, you're going to feel it. God is going to go into you and you're going to feel like you're a new person. And that's what's going on. Okay. So, Vayavo Shamsi, he goes and he encounters all these things. Vayafoch lo Elokim levacher, God gave him another heart. In other words, he suddenly felt like he is something. Vayavo kol otota ele, and all the signs that were predicted took place. The 2 loaves of bread, etc., etc. He goes to the Giv'ah, to that valley where he encounters those prophets, and they're all exhilarated and ecstatic, and the Spirit of God grips him, and he speaks in ecstasy among them. There's at least one, if not more, Christian Protestant denominations where they have this thing about speaking in tongues. We don't have that in Judaism. It may be that there are some Kabbalistic rabbis who do something like that, but by and large, we don't have that. But I remember many, many years ago when I just wanted to get a sense of what goes on with the televangelists. People talked about televangelists. I'm Jewish, I'm an Orthodox Jew, but in a way it's my field, clergy. And I was curious, what do these guys do? And I remember in those days, the big televangelist was Jimmy Swaggart, until his swagger got the better of him and he went down the tubes. But so I remember I'm watching Jimmy Swaggart for about 15 minutes. And first of all, he turned out to be really pro-Israel. So that was nice. Like if I had to listen to, I didn't have to, but if my curiosity got the better of me, It turned out that the Jews are entitled to be in the land of Israel. So thank you, Jimmy. Anyway, part of his deal is during his sermon, he speaks in tongue. All of a sudden, he starts like for about 30 seconds to a minute, making sounds. I'm not going to mock it because that's his religion. I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not being mocking. I've since met others who are involved in that denomination, in other denominations like that. So they believe in that, and that's cool. But like suddenly he'll talk in incoherently for about 30 seconds to a minute, making sounds that for our ears make no sense. And they call that talking in tongues. That the idea is that suddenly God is entering Jimmy Swaggart, and there he was talking to you, and all of a sudden he's making sounds like the angels or God are putting words into his mouth from another language that nobody knows, and you have that. And that's the best example I could give, lahavdil, we say, not to compare and yet to make it understandable of what's going on here. You've got prophets speaking ecstatically in ways that are probably incoherent to regular people listening in. And suddenly Saul, Shaul, is talking like them. From the word Navi, he's a prophet like them. He's speaking in ecstasy. And you have all these people who knew Saul a couple of days ago. He was like regular Saul. And all of a sudden he's talking in tongues with prophets. Vayomer ha'am ishal re'ehu. And people said one to another, Maza hayala ben Kish. What suddenly happened with the son of Kish? Saul, you remember, is the son of Kish. What suddenly happened with him? Ha'im hagam Shaul banaviyim. Is Saul also a prophet? Vayan ish misham vayomer umi aviyim. And Akin Gump hagam Shaul banaviyim. The text of the Navi, the text of this chapter 10 is telling us it actually became an expression. Thus the proverb arose. It became an expression. Is Saul also among the prophets? Let me give you a sense of what this is about, what came to my mind immediately. In the book of Bamidbar, the fourth book of the Torah, Sefer Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, there's a moment in time in chapter 11. I'd like to do this with you. Chapter 11 in Sefer Bamidbar. And it was a time there was a plague, unfortunately. We won't get into all of that at that time right now. And after that plague, Vayomer Hashem Moshe, verse 16. God said to Moshe, Esfali Shivim Ish Miziknei Yisrael, gather the 70 elders of Israel. Asher Yadata Kihem Ziknei Ha'am V'Shot Rav. Again, the context here is there's been a terrible plague. It's a plague for another time. We'll talk about it, if not in this class, when we get to it in my weekly Torah portion emails. Anyway, it's a few months away. But God says, after that plague, gather these 70 elders of Israel. Asher yadati kihem ziknei ha'am v'shot rav. V'lakachto tam el ohel moed v'hityatvu sham imach. Bring the 70 elders to me together with you. V'yaradati v'dibarti imcha sham v'atzalti min haruach asher alecha v'samti alehem. And as I come to send and speak with you, I will take some of the divine spirit that I, God, have placed on you, and I will take some of that, and I shall place, scatter, disperse some of that unique spirit onto them. They won't be the same. They're already the elders. They already are recognized as leaders, but They will feel something. Let's again talk about this imposter syndrome. They will feel like real leaders and elders. They shall become your cohort of leaders. It no longer will devolve exclusively on you to lead them. All right. So as that all goes on, I'm jumping ahead for a reason. I'm to verse 25 now, in chapter 11 of Sefer Bamidbar, Book of Numbers. So skipping the 9 verses I just skipped, continuing with the narrative. God, as prophesied, these 70 elders with Moshe are at the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting. God descends and takes from some of the spiritual glory that has been placed on Moshe's shoulders, and he takes some and imbues each of the 70 elders with that. And suddenly they began prophesying. Okay. Now it turns out 2 of them were late. They didn't come with the other 68. Vayisharu shnei anashim b'machaneh, shem ha'echad Eldad v'shem ha'sheni Medad. There were 2 among them who did not accompany the other 68 as among the 70 elders. They, for whatever reason, were behind, Eldad and Medad. But God placed the Spirit on all 70 elders, including Eldad and Medad. Tanakh alehem ruach v'hema baktuvim. And God placed on them also the same Spirit, even though v'lo yatsu, even though they had not arrived at the tent of meeting. They were still amid the general population who had not yet gotten a memo that God is about to make 70 holy men. They'll find out soon. But all of a sudden, prematurely, Eldad and Medad are prophesying amid the nation. And a young man comes, and he comes to Moshe, and he reports to him, we have 2 false prophets here. We have 2 guys, Eldad and Medad, and all of a sudden, they're prophesying in the camp. And Moshe says, Vayomer lo Moshe hamakaneh atili. You see, Moshe's assistant Yehoshua, Joshua, said false prophets, kill them or close them in, depending on how you interpret Kla'im. Kela is a prison. So one understanding could be imprison them. And Moshe says, you're being jealous for my honor? You're being jealous that I, the prophet of this generation, not that he used those words, he's too humble, but you're jealous that others also are prophets? Umi yitain kol am Hashem neviim. As far as I'm concerned, all the Jews, the entire nation should be prophets, if that's what God wants. Kitain Hashem et rucho aleihem. That's okay. Let all the Jews be prophets. And ultimately, the other 68 become prophets as well. So that story or that experience in the Chumash comes to mind as we study now about how Shaul suddenly is among the prophets. And he finishes that pre-prophesied encounter with the prophets in ecstasy, and how he goes back to where he was supposed to come, towards his family. Vayomer dod Shaul elav yel narod on halachtem, and he encounters his uncle. And the uncle says, where did you go? And Saul says, I went to find Dad's donkeys, asses, and I couldn't find him. And we ended up in the presence of Samuel, Shmuel the prophet. And Saul's uncle, Dod Shaul, said, wow, so what did he tell you? Wow, you got to meet the prophet? Like, who gets to meet the prophet? It's like if I would tell my uncle. My uncle would say, like, where were you last week? You were gone for a few days. I went on a business trip, and along the way, I encountered Joe Biden. Really? No kidding. What did Joe Biden say to you? It's like a thing. So, because that just doesn't happen. So, Shmuel, what did Samuel say to you? Vayomer Shaul el dodo, haged yigid lanu, ki nimtzu hatonot. So Saul told his uncle, well, the prophet prophesied that Dad's asses had been located. But But Saul did not relate to his uncle the other part, that he had been named king of Israel. So the people don't know yet. They don't know yet. Only Shmuel knows, and Shaul knows. And now Samuel calls a meeting of the nation. You'll remember the last time he encountered the nation, what did they do? They pleaded with him in chapter 8. Appoint Som Tosim Aleinu Melech. Name for us, place upon us a king. Told them, you better not do it. They wanted it. He warned them, he's gonna conscript your children. He's gonna conscript your sons. He'll take your daughters to be his maidens. He'll seize your servants and your actual maids. He'll seize your lands. He'll seize your vineyards. He'll take you to war. And the people said, we want it. We want it. So there's been a break. And now he gathers the people. Only he and Saul know what's happened since. Vayomer el bnei Yisrael. And Shmuel the prophet says to the nation, I'm here to give you an update. Amar Hashem Elokei Yisrael. This is what God says. First, you're going to have to, I've got news, but you'll have to wait a moment. I have to first tell you as a preliminary to the news. God said, I took you out of Egypt. And I saved you from the Egyptians. And I saved you over the generations that followed during the years of Joshua and Ehud the judge, and Deborah the judge, Samson the judge, Gideon the judge, Yiftach the judge. I saved you from one nation after another that wanted to destroy you. I always was there. You never were left defenseless. And what did you do? What is your gratitude after generations, God says, of my taking you out of Egypt and saving you again and again and again? V'atem hayom ma'astem et Elokechem asher hu moshil lachem mikol ra'otechem v'tzarotechem. You, in return, have contempt for and reject your God, namely me. This is God speaking through Shmuel. You rejected me, your God, who had saved you through all these disasters and troubles and sorrows. And you adamantly, vatomrulo, and you adamantly insisted to the prophet Shmuel, ki melech tasim aleinu, we want a king. All right? So v'ata with an ayin, hit yatzvu lifnei Hashem l'shivtechem li'alfechem. So now listen carefully. Get a good grip and get ready to hear what I'm about to tell you as you stand here before me, assembled in your tribes and in your thousands. Vayakrev Shmuel et kol Shivtei Yisrael v'elokei Shevet Binyamin. And Shmuel basically, I mean, you're talking about how intimately can you bring everybody closer when you're talking about thousands, tens of thousands of people. Alfechem, Aleph is 1,000. These are people in their thousands upon thousands. But he draws them closer And he specifically points to the tribe of Benjamin. Remember, the Jews in biblical times were truly divided by tribes, no differently from the way Americans are divided by states. On the one hand, we're all Americans, but like if you ever see a presidential convention, the Democrat or Republican national convention every 4 years, and then they call, and now the great state of New Mexico. And then you see all these signs for New Mexico. Yay, New Mexico. Well, Madam Chairman, on behalf of the great state of New Mexico, the fabulous, great, wonderful state of New Mexico, the state that grows whatever they grow, tangerines. I don't know what they grow. The state that grows tired. On behalf of the great people of New Mexico, we're newer than old Mexico. And we are the state that has given this country the following president. Well, we haven't given any presidents yet, but we have 3 votes. And on behalf of these 3 votes, we're spending 35 minutes telling you about the state of New Mexico, tying up everybody watching to tell you that our 3 votes, I am proud to say that New Mexico abstains. And okay, now we got to the great state of newer Mexico. It's so, but you know what I'm talking about? Like at the conventions, every state has got its own thing. That's literally what went on. That's how the Jews assembled in biblical times. They literally had flags and banners, each with the sigil, the symbol, the emblem of their tribe. Everybody remembers perhaps that the tribe of Yehuda was symbolized by the lion, or the tribe of Dan was symbolized by the scales of justice, and so on and so forth. By a Krevet Shevet Binyamin, Lemishpachotav. And so Shmuel, the prophet, has the Benjaminites come kind of take a position ahead of the other tribes. Everybody, let's move out of the way, make room for Benjamin to come forward. And then from among Benjamin, Mishpachat Hamatri, the Matrite clan. And from the Matrite clan, he sought out Saul, the son of Kish. And this is this big dramatic moment. And the whole nation is waiting. And it's sort of, all right, I hate to, spoiler alert, I hope I'm giving it away, but all right, I'd like Saul, the son of Kish, please come up front. And there's dead silence. Saul isn't there. They can't find Saul. I mean, you know, obviously someone undoubtedly said to the prophet, better call Saul. And so they've got to find him. Where is he? So, Vayishalu Od Bashem, where is he? Od Halom Ha'ish. Is there anybody know where he is? Vayomer Hashem, and God in prophecy told Samuel, you'll find him hiding among the baggage. He was so modest, humble at this point in his life. He had stage fright. He was not prepared to stand in front of the nation of Israel and be pronounced king of Israel, despite all the prophecies having come forth and true. So they had to go get him. I mean, it's almost comical. Vayarutzu vayikachu misham, they had to go run over, like everybody's waiting, and had to grab him. And he's basically going, I don't want to go. Vayatyatzei b'toch ha'am, and they stood him in front of the nation. And remember, he's an extraordinarily tall man. He was taller than anyone else. Mishichmo v'mala, a head taller than anybody else. Vayomer Shmuel Al'am, har item asher b'char bo Hashem, ki ein kamohu b'chol ha'am. Ladies and gentlemen of the Jewish people, gaze upon the man upon whom God has selected, for there is none like him in this entire nation. And I don't know. I wonder what it would have felt like. It's hard to know. Imagine you're standing there and this is the guy. The guy was just handing, you guys hiding behind suitcases. This is the king. This is what you came up with. I don't know how they would have felt. But they honored Samuel the prophet. And if he said so, then that must be who it is. So they all shouted Vayareu with a loud trumpeting type sound. Vayomru Yechi HaMelech, long live the king. Long live the king. Vayedaber Shmuel Amit Mishpat Amlucha, Vachtov Sefer. And Samuel put forth the word. He announced, this is going to be the king. He set forth publicly a general explanation. This is what the king will do. It's no longer threatening you or warning you. I'm telling you on the record, a formal anointing and coronation here. He puts it into a book. He writes it. Vayinach lefnei Hashem v'shalach Shmuel et kol ha'am ish leveito, and everybody was sent back home. V'gam, excuse me, Shaul halach leveito givata. Shaul goes back home as well. And as he's going back, he overhears a few people snickering. Uvnei b'liya'al amru, ma yoshienu zeh. A few people said, God, how is this guy going to do us any good? Ma yoshienu zeh. This is our king. Forget it. What good is this guy going to? Vayivzuhu, and they mocked him. V'lo heviu lo mincha. And where others gave him gifts, they just scorned him. Vayehi kamacharish, he heard it. He knew exactly what they said, and he knew exactly who it was. But at that moment in time, he made believe he hadn't heard anything. And that's an extraordinary act of sophistication. I don't want to compare myself to someone that great, but I'll tell you, I would, like, it's happened to me 2-3 times in my life, only 2-3. I'm walking to shul on a Shabbat. You know, we don't drive on Shabbat. So I'm walking to shul, and as you're on the main street, here in Irvine, it would be Michelson Drive. In Jersey City, it was Kennedy Boulevard. In other places, in the San Fernando Valley, it's Ventura Boulevard. And I'd be walking along a main strip en route to shul, and it happened like a grand total of 3 times in 30 years. Suddenly a car is driving by at 60, 70 miles an hour, and you hear them yelling out the window as they're passing by, because we're a yarmulke, Jew bastard. So what's the proper response? One response is to turn around and start running after the car. So they're going 70 miles an hour. How fast am I going to run? And they'll just laugh. You laugh at the Jew. Laugh at the Jew. Boy, we got him good and looked at. Or you put out a finger and you yell. So you debase yourself and you reflect to them that you heard them. And my practice has been on those 2-3 occasions to just keep walking like I didn't hear it. It's one thing if the guy is on the street on the sidewalk, he's looking at my face, he knows I heard it, I have to deal with it differently. But if a guy's just passing by, if I make believe I didn't hear it, he doesn't get the satisfaction of thinking that he insulted me. I didn't hear it. His car was going too fast. And therefore, he doesn't get the satisfaction that he left the Jew defenseless either. So Saul is sort of doing that. Not today. But file that one in your mind. File that one in your memory. That he's supposed to wait 7 days for Shmuel, and he didn't do anything. Meanwhile, chapter 11, we have 10 minutes. The country Ammon was a vicious, barbaric country east of the Jordan River. So just to give a picture of it again. So the Jews are over here. Here's the Dead Sea. And here's the Jordan River. And the Jews are here. Places like Ramah, Nov, Jerusalem, yada, yada, yada. And on the other side of the Jordan River, there's the country of Moab, and there's the country of Ammon, and their capital, Ammon. And so Ammon is comparatively close to Israel. It's comparatively close. Indeed, since Israel in those days was on both sides of the Jordan River, the west and the east. Remember, Moses is buried on Mount Nebo, east of the Jordan River. And 2.5 tribes, Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh, were given territory. Their biblical territorial apportionment was east of the Jordan River. 9.5 tribes plus Levi were given west of the Jordan, what nowadays is where the state of Israel is. East of the Jordan, which has been given to a country that they have named Jordan. It's a whole nother story we don't have time for. All this brown was Israel. So Ammon is not only near the Jordan, Ammon is on the border of Israel. And Yavesh Gilad is located right here. So here's Ammon, and here's Yavesh Gilad. With that map understanding, what happens here is that Nachash, the name of the king is Nachash. Nachash, the king of Ammon, encamps on Yavesh Gilad. He besieges, he lays siege to the city and says, I want you all to surrender to me. I want you to surrender. And basically, they say, we're glad to make a compact with you, a peace agreement. We even are willing to be subservient to you, because they're thinking we don't really have a strong king. We don't really have a way to stand up to the powerful army of Ammon. We're willing to surrender, white flags. But Nachash, that's not good enough. He says, I'll only make a deal, a peace agreement with you on the following. I want each and every one of you to pluck out your right eyeball. Only that everyone's right eye be gouged. I want to bring this humiliation to the Jewish people, that when I, Nachash, the king of Ammon, come and lay siege to a Jewish city in Israel, you have no hope. You want to live, it will cost you a right eyeball. It's crazy. That's what you're up against. And so the elders of Yavesh Gilad, what are they going to do? So they said, please give us 7 days to decide. Please let us just see if we could find a way to stand up to your power. Will you give us 7 days? And he's willing to give him 7 days. Because his perception is, you're not going to find anybody that can stand up to me. Good, have a good time. Give it 7 days, and then I want to see the eyeballs. And they sent messengers to that valley where Saul and his family lived. And he told them what's going on. And everybody living in that region heard what's going on across the river at Yavesh Gilad, and everybody started crying. Of course they're weeping. First of all, for the fellow Jews at Yavesh Gilad, and secondly, because it won't be long before they're next, right? First Ammon comes, and he invades Yavesh Gilad, and he plucks out all their right eyes, okay? And then when he's done with Yavesh Gilad, he'll come across, and he'll come to them, and he'll come to the Givah. So they're terrified. So Saul, he's minding his business. He doesn't yet have a palace, a castle, a throne. He's been publicly named king of Israel, but he's still a cowboy. He's still working his cattle. Vayomer Shaul Mala'am, and he hears people screaming in the valley. And he says, what's going on? Why is everybody crying? Vayasapulo Devrayanshe Yavesh, and people told him, here's what's going on. Here's what just happened at Yavesh. And a sudden Ruach Elokim, Spirit of God, rested upon him once again. Vayichar apo ma'od, and this humble, meek, stage fright guy that hides behind baggage rather than showing himself in front of the nation, suddenly became enraged with a sense of power And immediately he took a yoke of oxen, cut them into pieces. He sent by messengers throughout the territory of Israel. You see what I just did to these oxen, to this cattle? That's what I'm going to do to anyone in Israel who does not join my army that I'm going to lead with Samuel, Shmuel, to take on Ammon. We're going to war, and you better all follow me now. If anyone has any doubts about whether I'm king, you don't show up at the fight, I'll cut you to pieces, just like this cow. So over a moment's time, he no longer is a meek and humble. He might still be humble on a personal level. He's no longer meek. And he gathers an army of 300,000 Jews. And he says to the people, I want you to go back to I got an army here of 300,000. You who just came to call me, go back to Yavesh Galad and tell the citizens there, don't pull out your eyes yet. Give it one day. By tomorrow, at the heat of day, Kachomayom, at the heat of day, figure 12 noon, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., everything's going to be fine. You'll be dancing in the streets. And so it was. Vayihimi Macharat, the next day, and Saul appointed 3 particular leaders. He broke the army into like 3 columns, and they went to battle ba'ashmoret haboker at the break of dawn, and they slaughtered Ammon. So that by midday, by the heat of the sun, Ammon was so wiped out, what few survivors they had ran in every imaginable crazy direction. No 2 people even ran in the same direction. It was every man for himself. The survivors scattered. No 2 were left together. Vayomer ha'am Shmuel, at this point, man, oh man, for that moment in time, right now, an entire nation realized and accepted this man Saul as the king of Israel. And they suddenly turned and said, where are the guys who mocked you and said, you're no king? Hand them over to us, we'll kill them right now. Who is it that said, shall Saul be king? Hand them over, we'll kill him. And Saul said, not today. Today we celebrate our victory that God gave us, this extraordinary victory. And so the nation, as a nation, celebrating that victory, goes to the Gilgal, the great assembly point for worship and prayer, for a formal inauguration or coronation. And so as we close chapter 11, and so they go to the Gilgal where they offer sacrifices. And Saul and all the men of Israel held a great celebration there. Again, as we wrap it up, so the victory is in Yavesh Gilad, in the east of the Jordan River. Ammon is wiped out, and their survivors, however few they be, are running east back to Ammon. And with the victory in Yavesh Gilad, everybody works their way down the Jordan River to Gilgal, because Jerusalem is not yet the designated religious center of the Jewish people. Rather, Gilgal is. That's where people meet. And so they go to Gilgal, and the coronation takes place. Originally, it was just a formality. But now that he's wiped out a formidable enemy that was about to create just horror among the Jews, he's universally accepted as the king of Israel. And that's where we leave off tonight. Next week, God willing, we'll do another 2 chapters, and we'll see what happens next, as now the king who is accepted as king starts taking on the responsibility of really leading the people, not just a one-time victory, but now it starts getting more complicated. Thank you so very much for being here tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again Thursday night Mishnah for those that come to that class. We're doing the laws of chapter 10 of Pesachim that talk about the laws of Seder. This Sunday we'll be finishing up Megillah, the book of Esther. And again, we'll continue from here next week on Samuel. Lala Tov. Bye-bye.
Thank you.